I've worked with quite a few bands over the years. With Chili Peppers, I've chosen to stay with them for many reasons. One of them being they're honestly and truly good people. They're just really, I really love them as friends and just good people. And in addition to that, they love to play music and they play well. I started with them on Blood Sugar Sex Magic tour in '91. The first gig I remember doing was in Hawaii at a place called Pink's Garage. It was probably 300 people in an actual garage with roll-up doors and an old turbo sound TMS 4 rig in the corner there. Yeah, they've gone from clubs, large clubs, to stadiums, I guess, big arenas, yeah, big as it gets. I never wanted to be a sound engineer, really. What I'd like to do is design speaker cabinets and come up with an idea and make it, you know, be real. Think of an application and then solve the problems one at a time. Solving complex problems is really what I enjoy doing, like fixing the coffee machine. And then I would build speakers and rent them out to make money to design and build more. So I learned to do sound in order to maintain the rental side of things. Band would hire us or an event would hire us. I had to know how to mix. And yeah, the sound engineering thing is more of a side effect of what I really wanted to do or what I like to do. And I like doing this too. It's fun. First of all, and most importantly, if you turn and look the other way, look at this. We got nothing between me and the band. Just barricade. So during the show, I can walk up to the barricade and actually stand as if I'm an audience member rather than being a sound engineer that has this large or electronic surface in front of me. I find the console and the equipment to be that's not the reason I'm here. The reason I'm here is to connect the artist with the audience. And this is the tools that I'm using in order to do so. But the primary focus is connecting the artist with the audience. So taking the console out from between me and the artist, and being able to enjoy or observe the show more as an audience member is really important to me. So that's why I set up sideways. I also don't use any board lights at all. I don't label the console because if I don't have any light, I can't see the labels anyway. And if I can't remember where things are, I wrote the mic chart, I know where things are. If a guitar player can play an instrument without looking at their hands, I can mix the show without looking at the board. Got a Midas H3000 analog. I choose big analog console because for several reasons. One, I've been mixing on analog boards for 30 years now. I'm probably a relatively decent analog engineer, and if I switched to a digital engineer, I'd probably be a fairly low-level digital mixing engineer, and I don't get paid to be low-level, so I might as well stick with what I'm good at. I'll have to take a pay cut, right? More seriously, switching over would be exercise or an endeavor which I'd be willing to do if I had significant advantages to be gained from it. I don't really need more than the input structure I've got here. I don't need 64 or 128 inputs for a 4-piece rock band, or 6 pieces, the other 2 members. I look at the setup as like driving a car. You're in the cockpit of the car. That's why I turn off the board lights. It's all dark. All you see is the cockpit, and then you got your primary focus. The artist and the audience is the road in front and the obstacles. And I don't want to be distracted by this stuff. And I want to be able to see everything at once. In a car, you got your speedometer, you got your odometer, you've got your car, you got all the information that you need in order to navigate readily available. And with this setup, I can stand here, I can look down, I can see in just a glance, I can see what every single channel is doing. I can see what the meters are on every channel. I've got all my compressors and gates clustered together in logical groups, so I can look at the compressor set and vocal and know what's in limiting, what's not, what's gating, what's not, what I've done with the house EQ, what the analyzer is doing. All that information is instantly available to me without scrolling through pages and losing distraction and focus from the primary job, which is connecting the artist with the audience. Here, what kick, snare, snare, hat, rack, floor, ride, overhead, second snare, timbale, or no, rototom, and I forget what those guys are, rototom and kettle drum. That brings us up to here, which is bass, 4 guitar lines, 3 vocal lines, and a vocoder line. So there's 24, but of this, there's a stereo channel and a stereo channel. So there's 26 inputs is my primary. We've got another, these are effects, synthesizer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, probably another 14, probably 38 inputs total coming off the stage that I'm using. I try and be very conservative with mic inputs. I don't like to have a lot of open mics on stage. I'd rather have as few as possible, very specifically placed. One of the biggest issues I run into is room sound getting into the mics and then being re-amplified by the speakers, which makes everything sound far away. I really want to get an up close and distinct sound. I'll give you a full run. First of all, we'll start with importance. Analyzer, this is an old DBX RTA1. Love this analyzer. It's got a little problem here. I fixed it with some tape, but it's I like it because it's fast. I mean, this thing is, it is one of the few analyzers where what I see and what I hear correlate very well. It's got a 60 dB window, so I can see a very wide range, dynamic range at any given time. The analyzers that have different formats that are narrow and long, I feel don't give an accurate visual of what's going on. This next thing is stereo 3rd octave EQ, Brooks Siren, and that's my main house EQ. This is left over from the last one. I've made these faders on a 3D printer, these fader links, so that you can control left and right at the same time. These two mark 250 and 2.5K, so in the dark without looking, I can see these are actually glow in the dark prints. I can find the light colored one, I can count out and EQ this while watching the band without losing focus on what I'm listening to. This is what I use as a system EQ. I like to have almost all my EQs available. So this is Meyer CP10. So what I'll do is, this EQ here is what I'll use during the show to compensate for temperature changes, people coming, and things that occur during the show. This is where I put most of the EQ of how I'm tuning the system to sound how I want it to sound. And I'm not doing a lot on that. So once the show starts, I'll kind of mess with this one. Yeah, the CP10 is a great sounding EQ, by the way. It's just very smooth and non-intrusive. This is a lot more drastic, and when you cut something here, it's very audible. When you do it here, it's very, I don't know, musical sounding. When subs on an aux send became a popular thing in the late 70s, early 80s, when they first started showing up, the tendency was to go from stereo subs on the main PA to mono subs on a single aux send. And I believe that was a huge misstep or error, because when you have two sub sources reproducing exactly the same sound, it maximizes interference, power alley, and all, numerous issues. If you can differentiate, if you can make the left sub have different sounds going into it than the right sub, it will minimize this comb filtering at low frequencies that causes all these problems for us. So what I do is I actually run stereo subs on an aux send. So this is subwoofer left EQ, and then subwoofer right EQ, and then I send different things to the subs on the left and right. So maybe kick 1 mic will go to the sub left, and kick 2 mic will go to the sub right. Bass DI will go to sub left, and bass dirty DI in the mic. Dirty DI will go to sub right, the mic will go to sub left. So trying to alter and make sure the same thing isn't sent to both sub things as much as possible. This here is an Analogue Crossover, and it's inserted on the subs left and subs right. And what this does, it gives me an active real-time control over the top frequency, the low-pass filter of the subwoofer. So I can raise these up and run the subs up higher or drop this down. So I have a manual control over the transition from the subs to the main PA. And I'll change that from song to song a few times through the set, or just tune it at the beginning of the night. And these are subwoofer left and subwoofer right compressors. I introduce additional compressors in addition to the ones that are already in the processors. And this is to soften the overload. When they really hit the subs hard, I don't want them to get as loud as they can and stop. I want them to get fairly loud and slow down a bit. This is a processor, a sub-processor that I'm not using because we lost a cable to it, lost a power supply to it. I'll get that running at some point, so I'll talk about that some other day. Harmonic Synthesizer. There's an old DBX 120X DS, an awesome synthesizer. And I use this occasionally throughout the show to highlight some sub-harmonics of Flea's bass rig. Spare EQ for outdoor festivals and such, to run delay clusters or other ancillary gear, and a spare, another spare EQ there that replaces the CP10 for the delays, or it's just a utility delay. Over here we've got my favorite metering system. It's a Duro's 1200B, and it actually has every LED is a single dB of resolution, and it overlays not only the average volume, but there's a peak volume at the same time. So it gives you a really accurate visual of my left to right levels, as well as the differential between the average level and the peak level. So the more compression I use, as that differential will drop, and the less compression it'll expand. Also, this got a wonderful feature, is it's got a sum and difference feature where it's hooked up to the PFL bus, so I can PFL something on the left and something on the right, and this will tell me the sum of those two signals, and this will tell me the difference of those two signals. That helps with trying to, like I talked about before, send different signal to the left sub and right sub. I try and do that with the main PA as well. I try and send slightly different versions to each side and as few identical things as possible to both. So I really, with exception of vocals, I want everything sent to the left and right to have a significant amount of difference between the signals. I use 2 effects during the show. This is the PCM60 reverb, my favorite reverb, and this does my snare drum, all the toms, and all the vocal reverbs, as well as I use it as a distortion unit for 1 or 2 songs if they play them. It's got a great overloaded sound. You can take this unit, turn the input up all the way, and turn it to dry, and just overload this front end. Turn up the send to it very hot, overload the front end, and it gives a real thick, distorted sound, fuzz type sound. Secret trick to using these things, if you clip the input when you're using it on a snare drum, that distortion that this thing has, that nice fuzzy distortion, will add some crunch to the snare drum reverb and give you a much more interesting reverb sound. That's the way you get the right, in my opinion, that's how you get these things sounding right. This here does all the rest of the effects. I like it because I can punch this thing, I can punch programs that I want, program 3, enter, auto panner. So the auto panner I'd be using during Blood Sugar Sex Magic on the guitar, phaser. So this will do flanger reverb on vocals, stereo flange on vocals, phaser. I have 1 big phase effect on a song, fuzz. Higher ground does all my delays for vocals. So I'll just punch in and out various sends. I don't like to have all these effects piled on. I think a lot of shows I've been to have the engineers get a little more excited about creating their mark on the band and in turn create a distraction from the experience. Compressors, what I do, one thing that I do that is really important to me in the way that I like to mix is I put compressors on all the subgroups. And so I use a stereo compressor on the vocal subgroup. I've chosen this Fatso Jr. to get some warmth to the sound. When the vocals are louder, they tend to get a little edgy and softer, harder to make out. So rather than EQ them duller, and then they can't hear him when he sings soft, using this unit with the bus compression and the warp, with the warmth set at 4, I'm able to soften the harshness of the vocals when he sings loud, and it works really well. Stereo vocal subgroup, stereo guitar subgroup, and stereo bass subgroup, stereo kick snare, stereo toms, stereo round things made out of metal, stereo keyboards and piano. And these, I believe, I don't really know what those are doing. I forgot. I think they're like Josh's second vocal and one of the keyboard lines and one of the bass lines, maybe 2 of the bass lines. But I don't use those very much. So I use these DPR 404s, Brook Sirens, because they're high density. Since I'm using 16 comps here, I don't want the rack to be giant. I want to be able to look over and see everything. And one thing that I do look for in a compressor is I want to see that first LED at 1 dB, not 3 dB like the DPR 402 has. That 1 dB, so that 3 dB of compression is significant. And if I have 2.5 dB and it's not lighting up that light, that's audible but not visible, and that's annoying to me. This here is on Anthony's channel, dedicated to his vocal. This is on Josh's channel, dedicated to his main vocal. We've got 2 vocal mics for Josh. I don't remember what these are either. I'd have to ask Jim. Haven't used them in a while. Okay, down here we've got gates. The top 2 are stereo gates, DN510, Clark Technics. It's interesting, I like the Clark for the gates. Not a big fan of the Brook Siren gates, but I like the Brook Siren for the comps. Not a big fan of the Clark comps because of the metering on the Clarks. Stereo gate, nothing too special about it. This is kick, kick, snare, snare. And then I went to the quad version for rack, floor, floor, snare 2, and one of these is the kettle drum, and some other bits on, oh, rototom. Again, I don't really mess with those too much. This one's not being used. All right, that's, oh, and then we got a stereo recorder. We record everything to SD card, just a reference. But there's another console back there with Jason that records multi-track for everything. Sound system for this tour, I'm doing the same, almost exactly the same as last tour. I've got a L-Acoustics K1 rig. What have we changed? Mainly we went from K1, and last tour we had DV-DOS or Kara underneath the K1, and this tour we've gone to K2. So main K1 bananas, K2 underneath, K2 side hangs, and then Kara as our secondary side hangs. 3 hangs per side. No center cluster this tour because we have a new dynamic moving lighting rig that Scott has put together, so we've switched that to a couple of arcs on each side behind the PA shooting towards the middle. One of the advantages is this dynamic lighting rig because it actually is a narrower width than last time, so the main clusters are closer together, which helped me out. And I was able to get away without the center cluster and cover from the arcs in that middle area. And having the arcs there is kind of nice because now they're at the same time rather than at a different time frame than the main clusters. Subwoofers, we've got KS28s, 22 blocks of 12 on each side, underneath some aluminum stage platforms, so they actually act as stage extensions / risers so that the band can go out on them. And then we've got 4 sets of 3 across the front, another 12 across the front, totaling 36 KS28s. I can't tell you how many of the other boxes I got because I forgot. With the subs, I'm trying to create 2 single point sources rather than a blurry line. You know, having these these simulated arcs, time delayed arcs to cover a room, it creates this like indefinite sub location, and I'd much rather have control over. I want to be able to put something sub left, put something sub right, have distinct sources, and then deal with the challenge of minimizing the interaction between the two, either by offsetting volume to one side and having the other side a bit louder of the same signal, or altering the signals between, or both. And then, and so what we've done is set up a an end-fire array with the 3 subs stacked up pointing backwards as our primary 0 millisecond source, and then 3 arrays set up in a arc in front, or a modified arc in front, that are time delayed to project the sound forward. This also gives me control by altering the time delays of those front-facing subs to alter the dispersion and get more energy to the sides, or to focus more energy forward, depending on the shape of the room. It's a little awkward having 3 subs pointed backwards, maybe 5 feet from the monitor engineer. He's literally looking at the front of a stack of 618s, but because of the end-fire array, the volume levels there are manageable. This also gives me the ability to minimize the amount of sub on stage. We've got 4 stacks of 3 set up in cardioid or end-fire L-acoustic setup with the subs reversed, every one of 3 reversed in each of the clusters. And those are turned down in volume and timed in such a way so that they mainly just fill in the front middle area without being too destructive to the far field, or somewhat helpful in the far field, and also cancel out some of the sub sound on stage in the front and center for Anthony, because too much low end on stage is an issue with almost every band I've worked with. The reason I chose L-Acoustics, there's a lot of good rigs out there. I've mixed on just about every major large format sound system at a festival or an arena. What I'm looking for in a sound system, especially while on tour, is worldwide consistency. I want to be able to have as few variables as I possibly can, and I want to establish that baseline as soon as possible. L-Acoustics systems not only are available on all the continents and accessible in almost every medium to major market, but also the product line consistency. Like if you get a Kara rig or a K2 or K1 or VDOS rig, the sound of those various systems is more similar than any other vendor that I've worked with. So my whole mixing setup and style is based on first taking what the artist is doing, working with the techs, and getting the exact same sound to come off stage every day, like a CD, just playing a CD. I've got nearly identical sounds coming into these. I almost never change any of the EQs in the channels. They get set up in the first few days of tour, and they just stay. The gains stay, the EQs stay, everything stays. What comes out of this console is the same every day within very minor fluctuation. So then it comes into the sound system. The sound system sounds the same every day because it's built into the processor. The main variables are the venue and the temperature of the venue. Those are the things that are changing. The venue's changing from show to show or city to city. And then once we get into a city, the temperature of the venue is changing throughout the night. Actively, for me, those are the two main things. As far as the system's concerned, Jim and Roddick will come in, they'll tune the system, they'll set the delay times to make sure that the various arrays are working together well and have minimum amounts of timing issues where they overlap. And they'll address any major anomalies that they measure in the system response. But not a lot, very, very minor changes in the processor. Because I really want to see everything here. This EQ here stays relatively the same. The filters stay almost the same. I might, if a venue's low, mid, heavy, I'll drop, down a couple of these. I'll kind of alter those preset settings. Almost all of my work is done here during the show. For the venue, and also the familiarity with the venue. I can walk into a venue, I know just from them moving cases around, the frequencies I'm hearing resonate. I can look at the size of a room like this and see that we're going to have a resonance in like the 160 to 180, 125 to 180 region, probably around 160 for a room of this size. When they get bigger, that frequency drops. When they get smaller, it raises up. And I can see it's fairly soft. I'm not hearing a lot of reflection, so I'm not going to have as much issue in this 2.5, 2K to 4K region that I would in a harder sounding room. Almost all the venues are sold out with Chili Peppers, so that softens the absorption with the people, gives me a good baseline.